like to say. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a gorgeous place. I got a terrific introduction and tour today by Bob G. Very, very impressive. And I'm not surprised you're here. I mean, in addition to coming to hear me, I'm not surprised you go to school here and come here to hear people speak. The Onion is indeed the finest news source, and I'm going to spend part of my time tonight explaining to you why, and also how we get sort of caught up and lumped in with imposters like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, both of whom, I should say, the executive producer of the Daily Show with Jon Stewart is a former editor of ours, as is the head writer for Colbert. They were both stolen from the Onion under Dark of Night, but mostly they paid them a lot better. That's life. So I'm going to give you a little taste of who we are, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the history of the Onion, and I'll show you, since I think you're probably a collection of really smart Arkansans, and I see like a half a dozen what I would consider policy wonks hanging out in here. I'll try to entertain you as well and try to set you straight, frankly, because I think you're on the wrong course and you don't really understand what's going on in this world unless you understand the Onion. You know, Mark Twain once gave a speech. He got really good at giving lectures. He's my favorite author in the world, so it's not surprising that I relate to Mark Twain, and the Onion is, I think, the descendant of his sort of satire. But he was kind of a manic depressive character, but he had a terrific approach on stage. He would, I guess at one point in his career, he learned how to go out on stage and he would not speak. Until the people laughed. Sometimes it lasted a minute, sometimes two, sometimes three, but eventually they would break down and the place would be like a pack of hyenas. And that became the introduction after many years to his lectures, which is how he made his living, as you know, for so many years. So.
In the 1950s and 60s, it was Mad Magazine. In the 70s, National Lampoon. A decade later, Spy. Publications that made it big by cutting everything else down to size. So what's keeping us honest today?
Here comes the clue. This humor publication, known for its website, put out its first book in 1999, a #1 bestseller.
The Onion is one of my favorite sources of the truth behind the news. More than 3 million people join me each week to read The Onion.
If you're not reading The Onion, you're doing something wrong.
Somehow, when you say the words The Onion, it resonates with people. I mean, what is that?
Most newspapers are reporting financial difficulties these days. So why is this paper enjoying a boom?
Many Americans too fat to commit suicide. Man finally put in charge of struggling feminist movement.
Onion News Network giving Jon Stewart a run for his money.
My favorite headline today after the election was The Onion. Black man gets worst job in world.
The satirical newspaper The Onion recently ran a headline that struck a nerve because I think it's all true. It read, quote, "Recession-plagued nation demands new bubble to invest in."
I can't believe they're brainwashing kids like Chris to serve in the military.
Ah, yes, the bottom 10% of our high school class is off to fight another battle.
You stole that from The Onion.
What?
You stole that. I read that in The Onion about the war in Iraq.
Well, if that's true, then I'd say they've got some sharp cookies over at the, what is it again, The Onion?
So if I go up to your room right now, I'm not going to find a copy of The Onion, right?
No. Oh, damn it!
That's what I thought.
Most reliably funny things out there. It's incredibly popular, with 750,000 copies in print each week, plus 5 million individual visitors at the website every month. In fact, The Onion once did an article that made fun of us for rehashing certain kinds of stories, which is funny, and it stung.
When I read the New York Times or USA Today, I look at that and I think, well, this is somebody's idea of the world. My dream is to put all those papers out of business and have The Onion be the beacon of truth that's delivered to everyone's doorstep in the morning. That would be great.
Do I have to really go on? I got a call, courtesy of Bev, who called Skip, at least I think this is the way it worked, several months ago. And Skip asked me if I would like to come down here and speak at the Clinton School and the Clinton Presidential Library. And, you know, he seems like a bright enough guy. But I said, does he know what he's getting himself into? I said, you know, what are you looking for exactly? And he said, we've had Mother Teresa here. I'm sure it wasn't Mother Teresa, but it was the Dalai Lama or some other really smart, kind of oddly dressed person. And we've had Jerry Springer here, and he said, so somewhere between the Dalai Lama and Jerry Springer, I think you'll fit in quite nicely. So I was not comforted by that, actually. That's not the kind of call that I get most of the time. I get calls from people who read a headline in The Onion that says something like, voice of God over White House intercom proves to be Dick Cheney. And this is true. They call and they say, is that true? I mean, I follow CNN every day. I just can't believe this is true. How did I miss this? And I say, you're just reading the wrong publications and watching the wrong stations, dear. So I suggest you have an apple, get some sleep, and call me in the morning. But so in any event, somehow, somewhere, I would fit into this. And frankly, I don't get a lot of invitations. Do I look like the kind of guy who would attend a school of public policy affairs? No, I don't. Do I look like the kind of guy who's ever been invited to a presidential library? I'm not that kind of guy. Most of my speaking engagements take place at comic book conventions. I'm really big on the baseball card trading circuit. And I don't do half bad, frankly, at a firehouse now and then. Nonetheless, I'm here tonight, courtesy of Bev, duped, frankly. Happy to be duped, grateful to be here. You look really smart. So I think this is going to go well for us, because it's the slow ones that I have difficulty with. People who don't know me, even people who don't know me and think they've known me for years, think that I have the funniest job in America. They think that I spend most of my time reading headlines in the Onion News Network, listening to the Onion radio news in this expansive media empire we have, watching the Onion Network News, which actually ONN won the prestigious Peabody Award. That is not made up. We didn't enter, and last week, along with HBO, 60 Minutes, CNN's political coverage, and Saturday Night Live's political coverage with Tina Fey, not having applied, we were awarded the prestigious Peabody. We were awarded the award, given the award. Anyway, we got the award. That was pretty neat. So they think that I sit around and I read this stuff all day, and in this sumptuous office that I inhabit in Chicago. The business is in Chicago. The comedy writers are in New York. The pop culture people are in Chicago, about 50 feet from my office, very dangerous for them. So they think I sit around, I read funny stuff all day, which makes me extraordinarily entertaining. I think you'd agree. I think some of you would agree. And that then I generally take a nap. None of that is true. It's patently false, except for the part about the nap. That's true. I don't get an engagement like this very often, as I said, so I want to take an opportunity here to just kind of set you straight and set the world straight. I know the world is probably watching tonight. Hello, world. But the quotes by the New Yorker, that lefty, pinko, bedwetting publication in New York, and the New York Times, and even, I think it was Bill Moyer's comment about the Onion giving Jon Stewart a run for money, presumes that we are somehow funny, that there's something funny about the Onion. The Onion is not funny. The Onion is the only truly serious news organization in America, and I am, contrary to what you may think so far, a very serious man. A very serious man indeed. So I think that's kind of nonsense, and it's sort of perpetuated by people who would like us to be like them. We are, in fact, the biggest, baddest, most sinister news organization in the world. We write the stories that no one else would dare to write. We write the truth. Nixon investigated in connection with Watergate break-in. I'll bet you didn't read that in the Arkansas Democrat. The sequel, Nixon escapes. President kills 2, wounds 6 in stunning jailbreak. Some of you are aware of that, I know. And finally, the very sad sequel to that story. Feds gunning down Nixon outside a motel. He didn't go off to San Clemente in a helicopter, trust me. Slightly different take on what happens when a tanker runs aground in Alaska. It was a great advertisement. We're about making money, incidentally. I'm not ashamed to say that. So we went to Castrol immediately after running that story and said, how about an ad campaign? The Amish give up. A very, very, very sad story indeed. If you could read the small print, it talks about how life was, I mean, they've been running around looking like that, first of all. And they've got those funny looking little reflective things on the back, and they're still getting plowed down by cars all the time. And so, that's Elder, I can't read his name from here, but I know what he says. He said, this is bullshit. This lifestyle is just bullshit. Religious coverage has always been one of our strong suits. Our weekend magazine, Skip, I added this because of the Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa or one of those other people who's been here. But asking the eternal question, where are the girls at? The human side of the Dalai Lama, I would say. This is actually the front page that we ran. This is actually the front page that we ran 2 weeks after 9/11, when, if you remember, whether it was Conan or whether it was Jay Leno or Letterman, they wouldn't touch the subject. They said, is it ever going to be okay to laugh again? Not knowing what else to do, woman bakes American flag cake. What could be better? What could be better than that? This actually was nominated, I kid you not, and it's hard for even my close friends to tell when I'm telling the truth, and I might not be telling the truth, but I'm telling you the truth. This was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, and it resulted in a great stir on the Pulitzer board, where certain journalists from the mainstream, as I call them, said this is absolutely closer to the truth than everything we've read so far. We should give these guys the Pulitzer Prize. Dumber heads prevailed, needless to say. So I am still without a Pulitzer Prize, which I think is kind of lousy. But I fully expect to win when they announce next week. After we submitted our election coverage for 2008, some of which, if you're really nice to me, I'll show you. And finally, I have no idea why you're laughing, frankly. I think that makes perfect sense to me. So I have this forum tonight, and so I'm going to abuse my privileges, and I wanted to say that there's also an urban myth that's made the rounds for years that the University of Wisconsin was the birthplace of the Onion, that 2 students who were inebriated at best and possibly even under the influence of cannabis, I think they call it, created the Onion in 1988. I'm here to tell you that it's not true. That's not what happened. The Onion empire actually began when, in 1765, when a very humble but nonetheless very handsome tuber farmer named Friedrich Zwiebel skillfully bartered a sack of yams for a second-hand printing press, and thus began the Mercantile Onion. First edition ran in 1765, dealt with the hard-hitting news of the time, featured a great story, Benjamin Franklin is a great ass. I'd just like to pop that out because we were not afraid of controversy even then. I won't leave this up long enough because somebody might be offended, but I'd be happy to share it with you later. This is another one of our classic editions in 1783, Mule Deaths of Late. Again, Friedrich Zwiebel, unhappy for a reason that was never passed down to the rest of us, with Ben Franklin making fun of him about his latest invention, this week's death kite, and General Washington hinting at his bid for the presidency in 1789, which is interesting because while I hear a little chuckling in the background, we broke a story there. We did then what we have done to this very day, 200 and whatever the hell it is years later. That is, we break the news. We touch the news that no one else dares. General Washington Hinds had bid for presidency in 1789. This is incidentally one of the only times it's really good to be farsighted. Mysterious office would be highest in the nation, and the citizenry asks, why doesn't Washington just merely conquer us? So that's how we began. The truth of the matter is, kind of a sad truth of the matter, is that the Onion sort of limped along for the next 120 years until this man, the godfather of the Onion, T. Hermanzwiebel, the great-great-grandson of Friedrich, got hold of the newspaper and turned it around. He's the beating heart of the Onion, the man who shaped the Onion News empire as we know it today. Another salient fact, I think, extraordinarily handsome. And long before the MBAs, who I work with nowadays, I was going to say something about MBAs, but I won't, walked around saying, monetize, monetize, monetize. Our man T. Herman was onto it. It does you no good to produce the content unless you can absolutely find some sucker advertiser to pay for it. So T. Herman worked hard, and the 20th century was really his finest hour. We covered natural disasters, the least gay day in San Francisco history. It's not a story you saw everywhere. Amelia Earhart went missing, probably just shopping, her friend said. The famous private meeting, FDR, Stalin, Churchill meet for mutton, luncheon, nap. Hitler committing suicide, ravaging in Europe, a desperate cry for help, say therapists. The Defense Department deciding to reinforce the nation's brassieres. A story that went largely unreported. This one baffles me. War Rationing Board restricts nylon use to Armed Forces J. Edgar Hoover only. I don't know. I think he was fond of nylon, nevertheless. The Kennedy conspiracy. This is a headline you saw. Nobody was willing to touch this. Nobody was willing to touch that story. We did. I think there's a guy you remember. You might actually recognize that. It's Mr. William Jefferson Clinton himself passing the Americans with No Abilities Act. On Tuesday, Congress approved the Americans with No Abilities Act, sweeping new legislation that provides benefits and protection for more than 135 million talentless Americans. God bless his soul. Technology. Not only from the Silicon Valley side, from the business side. Somebody asked me before the presentation if we ever run into trouble. Alejandro asked me. Yes, this is one of those instances. My lawyer's out in the audience rather. He's generally in the office. And he can tell you later about some of the times that we've run into problems with people who just can't accept the truth. I was raised a Roman Catholic and beaten by the Dominican nuns, and so I take great comfort in running things like this. There he is, Benedict XVI, the first ride on the Excalibur at Six Flags, Eureka, Missouri. Man had one hell of a time. One hell of a ride. Investigative journalism, always our strong suit. Oh, stop. You've laughed at everything else, and now you're going to... You know, the Middle East. so many theories about what's gone wrong in the Middle East. You know, Palestine, who owns it, the Gaza Strip, it's a lawnmower. I mean, it's essentially about landscaping. We got to it. The economy. On everyone's mind these days. Again, had I known that Senator Schumer of New York was going to use this without asking permission, incidentally, he'll be paying royalties for the rest of his natural life. I also like the Hubble kaleidoscope there. Evidence find it's space just looking all crazy. And something that personally touched me, I know you have heat waves here in Arkansas, but in Chicago with the Eastern European community, not to mention the Irish Catholic community that I represent, we eat a lot of meat. Polish sausage, Italian sausage, bratwurst, and that was a devastating summer for us, frankly. I don't know if you can read the small print, but it says, paramedics administer first aid to a man who collapsed from smoked sausage inhalation. Very, very difficult. Are all papers salute to the green? We're environmentally conscious. Terrorism. I think there's a 1 in 365 chance this could happen, frankly. That was good enough for me to publish it. And finally, food service. I would urge you to look closely at the eyes of those people. I think we got that layout in Madison, Wisconsin, actually. So here I am in the bully pulpit tonight. I'm going to tell you about other appendages, other legs on the stool of our vastly expanding media empire. But one of the things you probably don't know about, but I'm willing to tell you about, and not only that, being the kind soul that I am, I'm willing to sell you. This is our first book. Someone mentioned before, Our Dumb Century, which actually rose to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Still available on the Onion website, www.theonion.com. You know me now closely. Get a little discount. Last October, last October we published The Onion's Atlas of the Planet Earth, Our Dumb World, now with 30% more Asia. And a free globe inside this book. Again, it's hard to tell the truth in the fiction with Steve sometimes, but this book actually rose to #7 on the New York Times bestseller list. Spectacular, dense, more interesting information. It's scary, actually. A friend of mine the other night said, you know, some people get the Onion and some people don't get the Onion. He said, I have a friend, I sent that book out to Phoenix to him. And I called him a month later and said, did you like it? And he said, every time I'm ready to visit a country, I pull it out and consult it. This is what he's consulting. France, one nation above God. I don't know how many of you have spent time in Paris. I have. Home to the Earth's entire population of 62.7 million people, every single one of the planet's 427 cities, and all of its history, culture, and beauty. France is the only country in the world. This is the French view of the world. If any of you students are here from France, I forgive you. If you'll forgive me. Iraq, they had it coming. What are you going to say about Iraq? Zambia, no fat chicks allowed. Italy, what are you looking at? Luggage. It's not going to move itself in the Bahamas. You got to have luggage, guys. Puerto Rico in a parade right now. I don't know if you visit New York very often, but 9 times out of 10 you'll run into the Puerto Rican Day Parade. It's a beautiful thing, celebrating your heritage like that. Iran, possible likely threat to the free world, maybe. Ukraine, this is one of my favorites, the bride basket of Europe. Ukraine leads the world in the harvesting, processing, and exporting of livestock, boasting mail-order shipments of over 500,000 tons of fresh brides every year. Peru, always with the goddamn pan flutes. Nice people, but the music is absolutely drive you up the wall. Poland, Chicago, we have a lot of Polish people. Rotates 360 degrees to read. I like the end of it where it says that Poland is better known today for a number of cultural achievements, including the screen door submarine, the glass bottom locomotive, and the cordless extension cord. And Chad, finally, where even the elephants take bribes. Well, not only did T. Herman Zwiebel revive The Onion after 110 years of its moribund existence, but there's another rumor floating around. I hear this all the time that there was a guy, an Italian guy, I think his name was Marconi or Macaroni or Tortellini, I don't know what the hell his name was, he was an Italian guy, and that he allegedly invented the radio. It's not true. T. Herman Zwiebel invented the radio. And we've been broadcasting the Onion Radio News since God lost his shoes. I'll give you a little sample.
It's the Onion Radio News. A really fun toy has been banned after killing 3 stupid kids. This is Doyle Redland reporting. The Whizco Toy Company of Montclair, New Jersey has voluntarily recalled 245,000 Aqua Assault Robo-Fighters after 3 dumb kids managed to kill themselves playing with the popular toy and ruining the fun for everyone else. Whizco President Alvin Cassidy.
These 3 retards came along and somehow found a way to get themselves killed. So now we have to do a full recall and halt production on what was a really awesome toy. What a waste.
Each of the deaths was determined to be the result of gross misuse of the toy, an incredibly cool device that could shoot both plastic missiles and long jets of water simultaneously. Doyle Redland for the Onion Radio News.
And more contemporary coverage.
Obama calls on the nation to put in one solid day of work. It's the Onion Radio News. This is Doyle Redland reporting. Today, President Barack Obama asked American workers to roll up their collective sleeves and put in one full day of work. The new president explained that a single day of solid, uninterrupted labor with no dicking around would increase the country's GDP by $3.2 trillion.
I'm not even talking about overtime. Just show up and put in the straight 8 hours of solid labor. That's all you're being asked to do.
Obama added that Vice President Joe Biden will be charged with closely monitoring Facebook to make sure no one sneaks on. Doyle Redland for the Onion Radio News.
You can imagine it was a short hop from creating the Onion Radio News, now the most powerful news radio syndicate in the world, formerly in America, now extended into the world, to doing television. Are you familiar with the Onion News Network? Did I mention that we won the Peabody Award last night? Do you think I could mention it again without offending any of you? The Onion News Network today broadcasts 24 hours. It is actually older than CBS. It's bigger than CNN. We broadcast in 278 different countries every day in 158 different languages around the world. We have 24-hour nonstop news programming. We have a morning show called, I think very cleverly, Today Now. Good. Where we have an extraordinarily attractive young woman and a really handsome guy, and they talk all morning long about virtually nothing, which is pretty much the way it works with morning television, I think. It's where a little bit of that satire comes in. This is the way we introduce the Onion News Network. So you can see that we've come a long way from 1765 when Friedrich bartered that sack of yams. technologically very sophisticated, very sophisticated. I think it's fair to say that no one covered the 2008 presidential election like the hordes of reporters that I dispatched around the country and around the world to cover the presidential election. I think you'll see what I mean.
John McCain is facing new competition on the campaign trail. Jane Carmichael has details in the war for the White House election analysis bunker. Jane?
Thank you, Andrea. A new third-party presidential candidate is cutting into John McCain's base of support, attracting voters who feel McCain is not grizzled and ornery enough.
Washington's drowning in snake oil salesmen, and I'm going to run them out, daggone.
Jode Kressbeckler, an independent from the Black Hills, officially entered the race for the White House this morning. GOP officials are worried Kressbeckler could play a spoiler role similar to Ralph Nader in 2000.
I got a tax plan for you. Here it goes right now.
Among conservative Republican voters, 33% said they supported McCain because he was the most cantankerous, disagreeable candidate on the ballot. Now, Kressbeckler gives them an even more irascible option.
I like him. He's mad all the time.
McCain is old, but is he old enough?
I'm voting for a man I can imagine drowning a bag of cats.
Now, while McCain says he would refuse to speak to leaders of foreign nations opposing the U.S., Kressbeckler has refused to ever speak to a foreigner in his life. He sports a wooden leg from his service in the Spanish-American War, and while McCain has spent the last 20 years in Washington, Kressbeckler has been living in a mountain shack with no hot water or indoor plumbing, making him a true Beltway outsider.
Now, Jane, realistically, does Jode Kressbeckler have a chance at the White House here?
Well, no, but he's connecting strongly with the conservative base voters McCain needs to win.
They support Kressbeckler's stance on the issues?
They absolutely do. They feel they're even more antiquated and unhinged than McCain's.
Really?
Yeah, for instance, here's Kressbeckler on international trade.
And all our jobs are going to China. Now, if I was president, the only thing be going to China would be missiles.
And here he is stating his position on Iran.
You can't put a bucket over a pig's head. It'll just make him skittish.
Kressbeckler also promised to cut Washington red tape by replacing Congress with a horse that stomps once for yes, twice for no.
Well, Jane, thanks for all the information. Now, we attempted to reach Jode Kressbeckler for an interview, but when our reporters approached his campaign headquarters, he told them to get off his property and stick his hound dog on them.
We got to turn things around here. We got to make some changes. We shouldn't be teaching those calculators in school. We should be teaching our kids how to work. American's a man who relies on himself. Every time I go to Washington, I smell a rat, a fish, a donkey with vipers. Let's get out the tar and snag them, 1, 2, 3. And then when I'm president, we'll kill them. Now, no, I ain't going to be in no debate, but if John McCain wants to take me on the wood splitting contest, I can guarantee I can split a cord of wood quicker than he can.
Did you see that story anywhere else? We now, incidentally, have over 2 million viewers a week on the Onion News Network. Likewise, I mentioned briefly, we have a Sunday morning talk show where it's called In the Know. It's hosted by a man named Clifford Baines, who in years of broadcasting has never actually hosted the show. He's always busy doing something else. But we get into the issues so deeply and so complexly that I have to admit, as the chief executive officer of this company, that at times I'm not sure that our panelists know just what the hell they're talking about.
I'm Juliana McCannis, filling in for Clifford Baines, whose autobiography is due today. With allegations of fraud surrounding the election of Umaru Yar'Adua in Nigeria, how do you think global petroleum markets are going to react, particularly considering their understandable wariness given the crumbling infrastructure and continuing civil strife in the Niger Delta?
Certainly, that's an important question. And,
certainly.
One with no easy answers.
No.
A lot of issues are at play here.
Right.
I agree. This gentleman that you mentioned certainly needs our trust and support now more than ever.
You mean Umaru Yar'Adua?
Yes, him.
Well, I
exactly,
think
yes.
that the reason that this situation is so volatile is because of the factors involved.
That's exactly what I was just going to say.
I just
That's
want to
well
bring
put.
some issues to light that we're overlooking here. I mean, we all know clearly that, well, Nigeria has a 14 million population. Main export is uranium. National language is French, and 18% of its livestock is exported. So they have a varied and fascinating culture and economic situation going on, and I don't think that's being addressed here at all.
And also, we want to differentiate between Nigeria and Niger. Okay, those are not only separate countries, but they're spelled
Which one are we talking
differently.
about?
Nigeria.
Nigeria. But
Yes.
the real question is, does Yar'Adua have the necessary political skills to implement plans that have already been put into place by Babangida? Particularly, I would say, the International Monetary Fund's Structural Adjustment Program.
Yes.
I would say yes, yes.
I agree, definitely. The comparisons are there.
But do you see Yar'Adua following in the steps of outgoing President Olusegun Obasanjo, or more like former President Ibrahim Babangida?
The first one.
The second one.
If I'm following you, you're saying that you think he's more in line with Babangida, right?
I disagree with that.
They're very different.
With whom?
Yeah.
With you.
And you said the first one, right?
We said the first one.
So the question is, what choice will he be making?
The right choice is to support the right answer.
Right.
The right answer
to the
the
And
right
that was
person.
what the question was in the beginning.
Which is the exact answer.
That you had said,
has
this
to
is
be-
a great question.
I have to say, though, I disagree.
Yeah, I don't agree with what I said either.
Okay.
Those were the only ONN clips I was going to show you at the moment, but I decided I'm going to try to stay down here for the weekend because I want to go to the Arkansas Derby. So I thought that it might be fun to show you a cut from Onion Sports Network, which incidentally, this is another true story. We just struck a deal with ESPN. They're starting a show called E60, which is their version of 60 Minutes. And rather than Andy Rooney, the outgoing segment is going to be Onion Sports Network. And I know that we have horse racing fans in this audience, and I think this is a very tender and sentimental story that will appeal to you.
And spectators at the Breeders' Cup World Championships this weekend will see the first ever openly gay horse to run in a major stakes race. Jean Ann Warden takes us beyond the facts.
Here at Santa Anita Park, many bettors are counting on two-time Beaumont winner Fantastic Feet to take the Breeders' Cup. But it's newcomer Ship's Captain that has everyone talking.
I see him at the head of the field, and I think, there's no way that horse is gay. But he is.
Trainer Gene Harris acknowledged the horse's sexual orientation in last week's Time magazine.
He can no more change the fact that he's gay than he can that he has 4 hooves.
There have been rumors of gay horses competing since the early days of thoroughbred racing. Flat Tire, Whirlybird, and Nor'easter were widely suspected to be homosexual. While the book Out in the Pasture revealed former Preakness champ Silver Dollar struggled to remain in the closet, going so far as breeding with mares to protect his secret. What were your biggest concerns about Ship's Captain coming out?
You know, the horses. I was worried how they'd react when they refused to ride in the same trailer as him. They buck and snort when we walked in the stable.
Gaining the acceptance of other trainers and horses is only part of the battle. While many racing fans are commending Ship's Captain for his bravery, others aren't ready to accept the idea of a gay racehorse.
It's getting a bad name on racing.
No, I don't think there should be anything like that. I think everything should be natural.
It ain't right.
I'm worried about all the other horses that are with them, that they're, you know, they have to eat together and they might get horse AIDS or something like that.
There's an astonishing amount of ignorance out there. I'll be in a stable with Ship's Captain and I'll hear a jockey say, "That's so gay." And I'll think, I hope he can't understand human language.
Despite the horse's high profile, Harris says Ship's Captain's priority is to race, not make a political statement.
Ship's Captain is here because he's fast, not because he's gay. There are other gay horses. You know, people go out to a petting farm, there's gay ponies out there that they're petting. There's gay plow horses. This is a part of the world.
The latest odds on Ship's captain winning the Breeders' Cup are 16-1, but don't count him out just yet. He's already overcome much greater odds just by being himself. From Beyond the Facts, I'm Jean Ann Wharton.
Thanks, Jean Ann. We'll all be watching to see how that gay horse fares.
I know that really smart people here, I've looked really closely at your faces and stuff, but up here and I've seen, I don't know, it might be 200-300 of you here and seen like half a dozen smart people. It's a little slightly better than we have in Wisconsin, actually. And I know that the presidential library is next door, politics, the public affairs, and so I wanted to just show you a little bit about what we've done over the years in covering politics, other than those things that I showed you earlier, which is a pretty flimsy excuse for me to show you more jokes. So Reagan may have been elected, doesn't recall, but you can see the kind of thing we do. We actually ran this during the primaries when Clinton was proving to be slightly more popular than his wife, I believe. And it got great pickup in the media. Maureen Dowd actually referred to this when they asked her to summarize what was going on in the elections, and she said, "I think the Onion said it all." I was in San Francisco the day that the paper hit the streets, and believe me, there were people who were confused. I wanted to say that we, as our masthead has a motto, and it says, "Tu stultus es," which means you are dumb. And so our political coverage has never been anti-right or anti-left or pro-right or left. It's always been anti-dumb. I think we've been equal opportunity skiers for the hundreds of years that we've been publishing, we've been broadcasting, and now now our video channel has been launched. We got a lot of criticism about the way we handled Bush. Alejandro was asking me earlier if we ever field any complaints. Now and then, daily, hourly. Bush people were sensitive from time to time. I stand behind everything we did. A very detail-oriented president. Shocked the White House staff, undoubtedly. Man who's cool under pressure. And finally, one of my favorites, really, Bush regales dinner guests with impromptu oratory on Virgil's minor works. He's a really smart man with foresight, preparing the nation for its final year. And Bush vows to make it up to country show how we actually did our morning show, a really, I thought, touching piece on George Bush before he left office.
Welcome back. We now continue our coverage of our top news story this morning, President Bush's tour of America to survey the damage caused by his disastrous presidency.
So far, that presidency has caused some $9 trillion worth of debt. It's left thousands of people dead, and still, even this morning, it continues to rage on. We have some footage to show you here of some of the survivors.
Well, I didn't think it was going to be this bad.
Arkansas has never seen nothing like this. This ain't the country. This just ain't. It's just mind-boggling.
Bush has been showing real leadership out here. Yesterday, he started the day with a flyover tour of Kansas. Of course, that's one of the 50 states in the direct path of this presidency. And then he stopped in Denver to deliver a very moving speech that that offered as much encouragement as he could to the approximately 300 million people whose lives have been completely torn apart by
You
him.
really have to admire the strength he's shown.
I'll be seeing people whose lives were turned upside down. I'll do my very best to comfort them. I ask our nation, for those who are prayerful, to give a prayer for the victims.
What we understand, some U.S. citizens were able to evacuate safely to Canada and take refuge there before the worst of this president.
What has the president's emotional response been to all this?
Well, Tracy, he cares deeply, no doubt. You can see just by the look on his face, he did truly love America, and to see that he all but destroyed it, I think it's just very hard on him.
Yeah, I have to say, this might be one of his finest moments as president.
You know, I think history may bear you out on that, Tracy.
Finally, I'd like to say that I would not have that. Skip, again, I'm grateful to be here. I think you took a bit of a risk because it's difficult to deal with the truth. I represent the truth. But I would never think of coming into this hall, this gorgeous, remodeled railroad depot, where you people are learning about public affairs and public stock trading, whatever you're learning here. But I would never come here and do anything to discredit the house that Bill Clinton built. I don't think we ever did this when he was president. We treated him with the utmost respect. He was, in many ways, the perfect president from the natural state. He was the perfectly natural president. I think our coverage was fair, unbiased. I think some of you enrolled there. It's just a small sampling of how we covered the Clinton administration, the perfectly natural president, except for one other small moment. I think it's obvious from looking at me that I'm a fashionista, and I believe that was a Vera Wang dress, and we were so looking forward to seeing him in it because he would have been positively fetching.
Fabulous. Everybody here knows The Onion is amazing, and it,
Thank you.
in a lot of ways, saves my life. I mean, to have an outlet that sort of says...
Me too. I've gotten like gigantic house payments.
So many questions. I just want to ask you about these genius writers of yours.
Sure.
So you said you had a group in Chicago that were the pop culture experts,
Right.
and then a group in New York that were the writers.
Well,
how does that work?
The pop culture people are in Chicago. We have a sister site called AV Club, which does about 1.5 million uniques online every week, and about over 3 million in print as well. So they're writing, that's actually not, dare I say, satire. That's straight news. It's music, film, food coverage. They're terrific, just terrific. The comedy writers are located in New York. We have 2 offices in New York. We have 12 offices altogether across the country. The business is run out of Chicago. That's where the AV Club writers are. The comedy writers are in New York. It started in Wisconsin. I made part of that up. And they moved to New York back in 2000. They decided that they wanted to be closer to the more serious comedy scene and be part of it, and they have. And it was the nucleus was a group of kids from the University of Wisconsin, none of whom ever finished college. Most of whom, the only thing they had to recommend themselves for jobs in journalism was, you know, changing the oil at Jiffy Lube and Subway sandwich preparation. But they are, honestly, I've spent my whole life in and around, and even was accused of being a creative once or twice before I morphed over to the dark side, where the money's made. But they are the most brilliant collection of people, and as you can imagine, having saved your life, God bless you, sinner. You can imagine they see the world very differently than you and I do. And the trick with them, for me, because I come out of a more traditional news background, and as you know, and I think it was evident to everyone here, I'm a very serious man indeed, is to give them as much space and latitude as possible. And they will work wonders. I mean, I think they are, in my estimation, and at the risk of sounding immodest, I think they are the most brilliant content creators in the world today. I think they're just terrific. And they're in New York. We also have people in every city, of those 12 cities I mentioned, who write as well. But most of the jokes come out of that den of iniquity, New York City.
Questions?
Next.
Right over here.
Of all the demographics that the Onion offends, who has the thinnest skin? Who's the most easily offended?
Oh my God, that would be impossible to say. It depends upon the day. I mean, that abortion story that Skip quoted got me just a deluge of mail this week, telling us that, you know, I'm a Roman Catholic, I'm an Onion fan, I've been a fan for years, but you've stepped over the line. They like, you know, if we made fun of Jews or Baptists, they couldn't care less. But when your individual ox is being skewered, that's when you're upset. So it could be any day. One day it's Oprah, because we recorded, you know, the 20,000th pound she lost. I have to say that we seem to not only offend but trick the Chinese pretty often. Are there any Chinese folks in here? Forgive me. We did a story a few years ago, this is one of my favorites, in which we said that Congress was threatening to move the United States Capitol to Memphis unless they got luxury seating and a retractable dome. And the Beijing Daily News, I'm not making this up, took that story and ran it verbatim on the front page of the Beijing Daily News, which is a fairly sizable newspaper. And then about 3 days later, the joke kicked in Beijing. And they called our editor and said, aha! We figured it out. You are American newspaper, make up stories in order to raise revenue. And she said, it's true. Similarly, we did another story, not to pick on the Chinese, although they're as good a subject as any for us. We did a story saying that Ling Ling and Xing Ling, a Chinese couple, had quintuplets when one child per family was the rule in China. And so we said that in keeping with Chinese tradition, they were going to have to throw 4 of the kids off the top of a mountain on Friday morning, and they decided to keep the oldest boy and the fattest boy. Made sense to me, but the other 4 were going right off the top of the mountain. So we were absolutely showered with letters from Lutheran Social Service, Catholic Charities, saying, we'll take the babies. We'll take the babies. Finally, one other story I'll tell you. I'm going to leave the names out, though, that we wrote a series of very, very moving stories about Barbaro, the racehorse, when Barbaro died. The satire was, of course, that more people were interested in the death of Barbaro than they were in the deaths of most human beings. And one of our stories had Barbaro euthanizing himself. This was prescient because this was on a Thursday that ran, and they actually put him down on Monday. And the following week, we wrote a story saying that Barbaro, his funeral was being held in Kentucky, and millions of Americans had decided to attend. And of course, we had a picture of millions of Americans, or maybe we could only fit 100 in the picture, but we had, I think the term is photoshopped, an image that we bought. And it turned out, it was the image of a wake, and there was a very distinguished American, absolutely coincidence, who was actually in this coffin. And photoshopping, if you're familiar with it, you can sort of lift out the body. So we lifted out the body and put Barbaro in there with picture of Barbaro, better days, nice picture, people following by, kind of crying, very upset. I got a letter the next day from the daughter of this very famous American who said, that's my mother's coffin. You know, I demand that you take all those newspapers and stick them in a landfill somewhere and apologize to the family and make amends. And I said, we bought the image. Your mother was a wonderful woman. It was nice doing business with you. So we can offend almost anybody, and we're proud of it.
Okay, next question. Any other questions? It's this one back here. Yeah.
Where did you come up with the name The Onion?
With the name The Onion? I didn't come up with the name The Onion. I've been around The Onion for 9 or 10 years now. There are two stories. One is that it's a metaphor for getting to the heart of a story, peeling the onion. I noticed the Arkansas Democrat, some clever headline writer, put that in your paper this week. The other, I think, is closer to the truth. It's that the people who found the onion were too poor to afford anything other than onion sandwiches on white bread. And they decided to call it The Onion.